Welcome to Halacha in a Year, where we can get to learn all the most relevant halacha through the prism of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. You are listening to Rabbi Ya'akov Trump. This year is kindly sponsored by the Moshe Group and CA in zechus of Rivka Biela, bas נחמה Shifra, and in honor of Rabbi Trump. Today we're going to be looking at Siman Tes Vav, the 15th chapter in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and the topic is Minyan and holy matters. We're going to divide this up into two parts. And in those two parts, we're going to be looking at three concepts. The first concept is the requirements of a minyan. The second concept is responding to holy matters, Devarim Shebekdusha. And then the third topic is, or concept is, the requirement of leaders of Tefillah. Our first concept, which is going to make up part one, is the requirements of a minyan. The background is as follows. The Torah tells us that a Davar Shebekdusha, a matter of holiness, needs to be said in the presence of a quorum of 10 men who are together in one place. We learn this from a very interesting observation the Torah makes. The Torah teaches us in Vayikra Chav Beis, V'niktashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael. I'm going to be sanctified among the children of Israel. It's hard to know what is the parameters of the nation of Israel for this requirement. So we look to the word besoich, which means among, and we know that word is used to describe a community called an Eldad. We learn this from the Adas Korach, the community of Korach, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Hibadlu mitoich ha'eda arayis ha'zos. Remove yourself from within, that's the same word besoich, mitoich ha'eda arayis ha'zos, so from this evil community. Well, what are the parameters there of the community of Korach? We learn that actually from the parallel word used to describe the Meraglim, the evil spies. We know that 2 of the 12 spies were good, and the evil ones were called till when is this evil community? That evil community refers to the 10 spies who slandered the land of Israel. So Hashem tells us that He is found and sanctified among Israel. The among is defined as being an Eldad, and the Eldad is defined, the community is being defined as 10 at the minimum. You may ask yourself, why would our sages learn the tradition of Minyan from 2 of the most negative communities of people? One being the community of Korach, those who rebelled against Moshe, and the other from the Meraglim, those who slandered the land of Israel. One of the reasons is because if it had been learned from great tzaddikim, great righteous people, then in that case you would have said, well, a minyan is only if they are of the same spiritual caliber. But now if we see that there is a minyan even amongst perhaps those who are less than worthy, then in such a circumstance any 10 people, any 10 men will create the quorum, even if perhaps one might think they are less than worthy. Let's take a look at a few basic questions. We're going to look at 15 questions on this section. First, just defining quickly, what is a Davar Shebekdusha? What does it mean when Hashem says, V'niktashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael, I'll be made holy? So we understand this refers to saying Kaddish, saying Baruch Hu, saying Kedusha, and reading of the Torah. These need to be done in the presence of a minyan, which is why also the Chazaras Hashatz, repeating the Shemona Esrei, which has Kedusha in it, needs to be with the minyan. Obviously, there are other things which need a minyan. So, for instance, to have Tefillah b'tzibur, which is another concept, to have our prayers united and elevated, and to reach further, it is best to be done with a minyan. But that's not because of the Davar Shebekdusha of saying Ma'amida together with 10 other people. That is its own requirement of what's called Tefillah b'tzibur. A few basics. Now, at what age can a young boy be counted towards a minyan? So we know that the law is from the time that he reaches physical puberty. That's when he becomes an adult man to be considered part of the minyan. However, that is measured. We take the assumption that by the time that he reaches the age 13, that he has reached puberty and therefore will count as a minyan for this as well. And we certainly rely on what's called this chazaka, this assumption, when it comes to mitzvos midrabanan, rabbinic laws. When it comes to biblical laws, like let's say reading Parshas Zachor or Parshas Parah, perhaps we're going to be a little more stringent to ensure that physical puberty has actually been reached as well, which could be complicated when it comes to bar mitzvah boys whose Parshas Zachor. Now, when exactly does this begin for a boy? So we measure this not from the 13th year, but from the first day of the 14th year, which is his birthday, the night of his Hebrew birthday, going into his 14th year, which is when he turns 13 in the Hebrew calendar. What if the boy was born in Adar, and yet when it comes to his 13th year, there are 2 Adars? It's a Shana Mu'beres, a leap year. In that case, we say that his bar mitzvah will be in the second Adar. So essentially, if you count months, it'll be 1 month over, but really, technically speaking, he has not reached halachic bar mitzvah until the second Adar. What happens if it's the flipped way? What happens if there's a boy who was born in a double Adar year, and he was born in the first or second Adar, and then on his bar mitzvah year, it's only 1 Adar because it's a Shana Pshuta, a regular year. Well, in that case, whatever the date was that he was born, so let's say it was the 13th of Adar Rishon, he'll now become bar mitzvah in regular Adar 13. This can come out with an interesting conundrum, which means to say that there can be a boy who is younger who will have his bar mitzvah earlier than a boy who's older. So, for instance, if there's a boy who is born in the first Adar and he's born on the 20th of the first Adar, and there's a boy who's born in the same year on the third or the second Adar, so he's really 13 days younger than the first boy. But when the Adars get pushed together into a Shana Pshuta, it could be that the person who has the second Adar, whether his bar mitzvah on the third of a regular Adar being before the person who's actually older than him. Just an interesting way this could converge as well. Now, how do we count the people for a minyan? How exactly do we count them? So this is something which I think many people are aware of, and that is we're not supposed to do a head count. We're not supposed to point fingers and count. Even for a mitzvah, we don't count the nation of Israel. Rather, we usually use a pasuk. So the pasuk that the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch suggests is Hoshia esamecha vorech es nachlosecha ren v'naseim ad ha'olam, which is a pasuk which has 10 words. So we go around and we sort of look in the direction of each of those 10 people, those 10 men, by saying one of those words in the pasuk. It's the last pasuk in Tehillim Chav Ches, the 28th chapter of Tehillim. And also, it does not have Hashem's name in it, so therefore you're not attributing Hashem to any one of them, but it is talking about salvation and HaKadosh Baruch Hu helping the nation of Israel. So that's the pasuk that's used for this as well. One obviously should not be singing it, because if it's singing, then it's Hoshia esamecha vorech es nachlosecha urem urem urem. So if you only need 10 for this to work. Now, where do we learn this concept that we don't count the nation of Israel from? So the mitzvah could be from the beginning of Parshas Kisisa, that when we count the nation of Israel, we only count the shkalim. We see this in practice in Sefer Shmuel Aleph Perek Tesvav, where Shmuel Shashau HaMelech is taking the nation of Israel into battle against Amalek, and it describes Vayifkadeim Betalaim, he counted them with their lambs, meaning he asked everybody to submit a lamb, and that's how he did a head count, but he did not go around counting them individually himself. What is the physical parameter to make a minyan be in one quorum? So it has to be 10 men have to be in one room. What happens if there's 2 rooms and the doors open between them, and there's 5 in each, or 6 in one and 4 in the other? That does not count. That does not create a minyan, and they need to be in the same room. What happens if there's a minyan in one room and the doors open, and there are many other people spread out outside of the room? Well, technically speaking, once you have the quorum, once you have the minyan in one room, then people outside who hear the Amen or hear the Kedusha can answer, and you can answer even houses away if you know what's going on, answering Baruch or answering Kaddish. But you need the quorum to be in one room. What happens if they're in the door frame? They're in the door frame. Does that count? Is it out? Where precisely is the edge of this? So it depends. If you close the door and they would be outside, they're outside. If you close the door and they're on the inside, they are in the inside. Generally speaking, people have properties like gas. They like to spread out. But when it comes to a minyan, you need to be able to actually be in one container. You need to be in one place for this to work as well. In the situation where people are far away and they hear from a minyan and they respond, that is fine, even very far away, as long as there's no, they're not near something which is an avodah zarah or a place that's disgusting, there's excrement around, and obviously they can't respond in such a case as well. What if there is exactly a minyan? So there's 10 men in one room. When am I, as a man, allowed to leave that room? So if there's an exact minyan and they're counting on you, you are not allowed to leave until after Aleinu, at the end of the davening, which is the end of Shachris, end of Mincha, and end of Ma'ariv. This is based on a pasuk in Yeshayahu Perek Aleph, which is V'ozei Hashem yichlu. Those who leave God will perish. So it's a very not good thing to do this, to leave when there's a minyan and they're counting on you. What if there's more than a minyan? So it depends. If one's already davened, and so one's heard all the Dvarim Shel Kedusha necessary, and one was just trying to help this minyan, and now they get 11, 12, 13 people, 12 men, and you're able to leave, you're allowed to leave, because you already yourself davened, and they have a minyan. But short of that, if you need to daven, or if they need you because you're the 10th, you're not allowed to leave. What if we started with 10 men, and then somebody happened to leave? They didn't know this halacha, they ran out, they had to run out. In that case, Are they allowed to continue? Is the minyan allowed to continue? In this situation, the answer is that they actually may finish what it is that they were up to at that moment in time. So if they were in the middle of Kaddish and the minyan leaves, they are allowed to finish Kaddish. If they're in the Chazara Sashatz, the repetition of the Shemona Esrei, they are allowed to finish it, even saying Kedusha and Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu. But if it's in Israel or Sardin, they cannot say Birkas Kohanim, with the Kohanim as well. What about if the minyan leaves during laning? There's 10 men, and then one of them leaves during laning. What about that? So they can finish the laning, but they're not allowed to add an extra aliyah, like a hasafa, an eighth, an achron on, or they do not do maftir. Rather, the last person to get an aliyah can do the haftarah without the brachas as well. And similarly, in the Shemona Esrei, when one finishes the chazar sashatz and the minyan's left, one cannot say the kaddish afterwards because that's considered a new entity. And what is the minimum of those who are left behind that can still finish what they're doing? Up till 6 remaining would be sufficient for this. So we've looked at the halachas surrounding a minyan, very practical halachas which apply all the time. Now we're going to move on to the next stage in the next part of this learning to understand how to answer davar shebekdusha and how to nominate the right chazan. In the meantime, have a wonderful, meaningful